Series 4 of My Greek Odyssey sees us travelling through the southern islands of the Dodecanese, from Kos to Σύmη and Rhodes, all the way down to Kastellorizo. It's a region of Greece with significant influence from Asia Minor and landscapes quite unlike other parts of the Mediterranean. The history is as dramatic as the scenery, and of course, the cuisine is unforgettable. There's the cliched beaches and wonderful people, plus unique cultural elements that give each destination its own personality. In this episode, I'm continuing my time on Σύμη. We'd already spent a couple of days here, but with so much to see and do, we decided to stay the week. I'm also going to visit one of the smaller nearby islands, Alimιά. Abandoned for just on 50 years, this little gem has some great stories that have sat under the radar for way too long. After a busy few weeks travelling from island to island, the crew was starting to get a little tired. Yeah, there's plenty of tougher jobs out there, but lugging heavy camera gear around in the Greek summer takes its toll. So a couple of days of rest were in order, and there are a few places better to spend some downtime than Σύμη. For me, having a break means learning something new. In this case, it was the flight board that drew my attention. As embarrassing as continually falling off was, all it did is make me more determined. My son Irenaeus was watching the whole time, and he'd mastered it in 10 minutes. If I didn't get it right, I'd be hearing about it all night. Most people that visit Σύμη don't venture beyond the main harbour of Yali. It's understandable, as there's so much to offer within a walking distance. If you only ever saw this part of the island, then you'd still have had an unforgettable time. There's a reason this island attracts thousands of tourists throughout the summer. But there's another side to it, one that's a bit more peaceful and remote, with beaches and towns that are known only to locals and a handful of adventurous travellers. Despite having been here several times, I haven't seen the complete picture. But thanks to this odyssey, I have the time to better explore these little gems. Heading south, we made our way to one of the most visited monasteries of Greece. From there, the plan was to travel a short distance across the channel to an uninhabited island. After that, we would be turning Miazui towards the east coast beaches. In the southernmost part of the island is this Bay of Panormitis. In Greek, that means anchorage in all weather. It's also the name taken by the local monastery worshipping Saint Michael. They get 150,000 tourists here a year, pilgrims coming to worship the patron saint of Σύμη. Along with its ecclesiastical history, during the Second World War, the monks had set up a signalling transmitter here to provide sanctuary for the Allied soldiers. In February of 1944, that signalling transmitter was found by the Nazis. The friar abbot Chrysanthos Maroudakis and two of his helpers were executed right here in front of the monastery. I get a bit emotional thinking about these slices of history. The story of human sacrifice here in other islands is similar in many other parts of the world impacted by conflict. People have risked their lives trying to preserve their freedom and way of life and to protect the vulnerable. I often wonder what I would have done in the same situation. It makes me think of those that have made these sacrifices as being heroes. This has been a religious site for 1,500 years or more. The current Venetian-style monastery was built in the 18th century and, amongst other things, features the highest Baroque bell tower in the world. It's a major pilgrimage site for Orthodox Greeks who come to pray to the famous icon of the Archangel Michael Panormitis, who's the patron saint of the island and guardian of sailors across the entire Dodecanese. Beyond that, the frescoes that adorn the walls and elaborate chandeliers are a sight to behold. In the past, sea captains and their sponge divers would sail to this place from Yalos before they went out to the far reaches of the Mediterranean seeking their sponges. Saint Michael is also the patron saint of the sick, and majority of pilgrims today come here trying to heal their sicknesses by providing votives as an offering to Saint Michael. Like many of the icons I've come across on the islands, this one is said to have appeared here miraculously and each time it was removed, it would only reappear again in the same location, hence becoming a part of religious folklore. Outside the monastery, it's much like any other port, with quiet walkways and fishing boats bobbing about the harbour. It's the perfect setting to while away the day, reflecting on the world and planning future adventures. For us, there was already a plan afoot. The next stop on the schedule was a visit to one of those tiny uninhabited islands that I particularly enjoy exploring. They always have a story to tell with narratives that have often been lost to the ages. Researching these places inevitably reveals special moments in time that define an island's personality. Sometimes it leaves us wanting to know more.
To the south and only a stone's throw from Σύμη is this tiny island of Σέσκυλα. Population 0. It's actually owned by the monastery on Σύμη. Now, when you first look at it from Σύμη, it looks abandoned, and it is. But there's also a few stories to tell, and I want to get further in to discover what Σέσκυλα has to offer. Absent of hunters, it has wonderful wildlife of birds, partridges, and many raptors that feed on those partridges. Looking forward to going around the corner and seeing the settlement. I think I saw a sight of a couple of buildings there as well.
I love this stuff. There are a few places on the planet where you can explore remote regions like this, with such picturesque scenery, like the buildings that once stood here. The facts behind the events that occurred on the island have eroded away. Time is similar in power to Mother Nature, in its ability to erase history if it's not recorded in books or handed down via spoken word. What occurred here requires a certain amount of creative interpretation to bring to life. Upon first look, it's not entirely clear that people once inhabited the island. Boats pass by daily, oblivious to the story that unfolded here in this small atoll centuries ago. It's not so much what happened on dry land, but in the waters that surround.
Thanks, Yanni. This tiny island of Σέσκυλα is surrounded by another 2 or 3 smaller rocky islands. It's here, I'm told, in 411 BC that the Athenian fleet retreated after the surprising defeat to the Spartan navy. I can just imagine how they felt. There would have been wounded soldiers, ships that were almost a wreck. Wow.
The reason it was such a surprise that the Athenians were defeated is because of the two. They were considered the superior naval power, whereas the Spartans had the better army. It was one of the many sea battles waged during the Peloponnesian War, which went from 431 to 404 BC. Eventually, the Spartans would achieve superiority on both land and sea, with the Battle of Aeospotami in 405 BC seeing the destruction of the Athenian navy. The topography and location of islands like Σέσκυλα lend them to always having a church or fortress of some type. In this case, it has both, plus pristine untouched beaches that are frequented by dayboats. One thing you'll notice in Greece is that even the most remote rock in the middle of the sea will have a place of worship.
Well, Yanni, something happens here. What do you think?
Από ό,τι φαίνεται εδώ κάνουνε πάρτι.
Parties. Εύχομαι να είναι ανοιχτά.
Α, την ανοίξουμε. Δεν κλειδώνουν κανονικά οι εκκλησίες.
The only people that visit these faraway churches are passing sailors or fishermen. Most will stop and pay their respects, if not out of faith, then as a way of connecting with their wider culture.
After you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Γεια. Even though there's no population on this island, there's still a church. And every time I come to an island with a church on it, and it's almost abandoned, I like to go and light a candle. I'm not really a religious person, but it's part of my DNA, part of how I grew up. And I get this little bit of spiritual enlightenment when I see the light of the candle. Now, you don't have to be Greek Orthodox, you can be Buddhist, it could be incense, it could be anything. But it's a good moment. Thanks, Yanni. Now, There seems to be no candles in here, but there's an oil lamp, which symbolically is almost the equivalent. Now, we light the candle in the Greek Orthodox religion for a number of reasons, but the two that stick with me is that it symbolises the purity of the beeswax and the purity of the soul. And the light of the candle or the oil lamp is the light of Christ. It's almost poetic, and they've been doing it for 2,000 years. Yeah.
Lighting a lamp or candle is as much about the process as the religious symbolism. For me, it's a moment of reflection and keeps me in touch with a part of my Greek heritage that doesn't necessarily get as much focus as other areas.
Ah, there they are, Yanni. Have a look. Huh?
So we must find a way to go up there.
We're not going up there, mate. There's no way. 2,500-year-old walls, they can stay there. Let's go. Let's go. On there.
Ancient walls perched on a hilltop overlooking a place of worship where ancient practices are still carried out. Empires have come and gone, but the Greek Orthodox faith and its foundations have endured. It's a testament to the power of religion and the depth it can embed itself into a culture. So far it had been a restful day, spent exploring little-known corners, and I had every intention of keeping it that way. I was keen to avoid the crowds and see some things that your average traveller misses out on. We'd reached the southernmost point of the island, and it was time to start heading back to the main port. But there were still a couple of stops to be made along the way. Regardless and unaware of my plan, Helen pulled rank, instructing the captain to head into the next beach so she could have a swim. Let me explain the hierarchy on Meozoi. There's the crew, who are told what to do by the captain, and he takes instruction from me. So you would think that places me at the top of the chain of command. But then there's Helen, who supersedes us all. As they say, happy wife, happy life. We dropped anchor at the tiny beach of Nanu, and wow was it a surprise. The port of Yali is only a short boat ride away, and it's full of tourists. Little do they know that a quick trip on a water taxi will get them to a seemingly remote and secluded beach, complete with a fantastic tavern.
You've got to come to this beautiful beach, Nanu. You can only get here by water taxi. It comes every hour. Have a swim, feed the goats, have a feed at this beautiful tavern and try their unreal grape sweet. But I put on so much weight, I think I'm not going to have any. The cameraman's going to have this. It looks inviting though. Oh, look at that. Oh, man. Ευχαριστούμε, ευχαριστούμε. Eh? Now, can I have my coffee as well? Okay? Ah, you can't beat a Greek coffee, can you, boys? Eh? Give him some too. He's got to have some. You're greedy, you know that? You little one? Yeah, that's it. You get there. You go, son. Here you go. Your mates are over there looking, saying, why can't we have some as well? Here we go. You're both here. Now, what about the other guy? Yeah, you're the other guy first. Come on. You've got to share, okay? Yours. Now your turn. You come here. You come up, 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 up. That's it.
There was little more than a few goats and a handful of people on deck chairs or bathing in the warm sea. It was an idyllic location, perfect for Helen to have a dip and me to grab a coffee. But there was another spot we passed along the east coast that was my favourite. The Bay of St George, surrounded by 200-metre high cliffs, reminded me of Shipwreck Bay in Zakynthos, with the absence of mass tourism. Apart from a couple of yachts and some goats feeding on the beach, we had the place to ourselves. It never ceases to amaze me just how many pieces of paradise I come across as I journey through this odyssey. The Greek islands keep showing me that just when you think you know a place well, there's always something new around the corner. From above, it looks even more like Shipwreck Bay. This will definitely be another one of those places that gets added to the ship's log as a spot we have to come back to someday. Hopefully, it stays hidden from the masses. After spending a few days exploring the island, it was time to head back to the main port for one last time. It's a very busy harbour, one of the busiest in the Dodecanese. Visitors come here from across Greece as well as Turkey, which is only a couple of miles to the east. From small sailing boats to the largest yachts, and even cruise liners, Símη gets hectic. For me and my guests, when we sail into port, it's always a fun and exciting experience. But for the crew, especially the captain and Kyriako, there's nearly always a little bit of anxiety and elevated heart rates. Navigating tight spaces, dodging passing boats, and finding the best spot to park, it's something they've become masters at. Between them, they've spent over 60 years on the water. The captain started his nautical career in the Hellenic Navy. Kyriako was in the Greek Army Special Forces when he was young, but ended up travelling the world on freighters of all sizes. I'm not sure what's more difficult, Navy and cargo ships, or taking care of me.
Símη has some absolutely magnificent beaches around its perimeter. But the problem is the roads aren't the best. So to get to them, you need to go by boat. And there's a plethora of water taxis and buses here. And as you can see, people are waiting to go for their swim today. Good morning. How are you? Off for a swim? Enjoy. Yassas. Smiles all over. I've been to a number of ports in the Mediterranean, and for me, Símη has to be the second most picturesque port in all the Mediterranean, after Bonifacio in Corsica. But this one for me just might go a little bit above because close to home, you know.
Right now, I'm picturing the smiles on the faces of those amongst you that have visited the beautiful island of Símη before. If you're anything like me, then seeing this spectacular patchwork of colours and the stunning architecture would bring back fond memories. It's a place that once you've visited, you'll never forget it.
Símη was famous for its sponges in the 18th and 19th century, but it was also famous for building high-speed boats. And this area here in Evangelistria, named after the church that's sitting up there, is where they built all those boats. Very, very wealthy town. Probably one of the most wealthy towns and islands in all of the Aegean as a result of those high-quality sponges and these boats. It was almost like the Switzerland of the Aegean because that Turkish dominion was all over the Aegean, all over Greece. So the Ottomans basically gave them autonomy because of the high-quality sponges and these fast boats that they built. They palmed off to the Sultan.
Nowadays, there's little that remains of the famous shipyards that once dominated the port. Instead of sponges and boat building fueling the economy, it's tourism that brings the money and keeps the people employed.
You know what? Kyriako, when he was driving the boat, he was doing it very well. He might want to take your job.
I know that.
The main port has shops, bars and restaurants that can keep Helen entertained for hours. I, on the other hand, am not a shopper. I prefer to use my time exploring, stretching the legs and searching for new things to see and do. And in the area around Yali, there's plenty of just that.
Most people that come to Símη only visit for the day and they spend most of their time in the port, but there's so much more to do. One of the things I like doing is riding my bike or walking to Emborio. It's a 3K walk from the clock tower and it's real fun.
It might only be a short stroll away, but the next bay over from Yali, which is where I'm headed, has a much less touristy feel. Here you'll find more bars, taverns and hotels, but not the souvenir stores and crowds. At night, it's a local hotspot and seems like the trendier place to be seen.
Allimιά. If it gets too hot for you, you can have a swim at one of the many beaches all the way along the coast.
The road seems almost out of place in the landscape. It's clean and clinical, like a neat scar on the rocky hillside. There's also no delineated footpath, probably because you rarely see a car on it. Actually, you're lucky to see many people either, except for an occasional jogger or walker. It's a good thing there's not much traffic, because you spend most of your time staring at the scenery instead of the road ahead. The only downside is there's no shade along the way, so a midday stroll on a hot summer's day would probably be off the cards.
bad. Awesome walk, nice finish, panoramic.
Emborio Beach is the polar opposite of the main port. There are no crowds, it's quiet, and the sea beyond is calm and free of any boat traffic. It's hard to believe that this was once the trading capital of the island, hence the name Emborio, which translates to trading centre. There are places of the same designation on other Greek islands too, like Santorini. It's another of those confusing names they give locations in Greece. The Knights of St John were a Catholic military order that rose to prominence around the year 1100, after the conquest of Jerusalem during the First Crusade. They were dedicated to the care of pilgrims travelling to the Holy Land. Eventually, their influence waned, and in the 16th century, they made Malta their seat of power, from which they assumed the role of defender of the region.
Dimitri, the Knights of St John abandoned this castle and there's not much left of it. They demolished it. What happened?
When they learned that the fleet of Suleiman the Magnificent was approaching, they exploded the castle and they went to get closed in the castle of Rhodes to defend altogether against the Ottomans.
And they just abandoned the island.
They abandoned the island and they went to Rhodes. So when the fleet entered into the harbor, the Ottoman fleet, the citizens welcomed the Turkish like liberators. And Turkish, they were always giving privileges to the areas they were giving up without any resistance to their arrival. They were building since ever the fastest sailing boats in Mediterranean.
The Simeots.
The Simeots. And because of this, they were serving like messengers of the Sultan to his fleet. And they were involved with the maritime post of the Ottoman Empire as well. Because of this service to the Ottomans, the Turks didn't tax the harbor of Sími. And it was a free harbor.
And this did not happen anywhere in the Dodecanese, only in Sími?
No, only in Sími.
Only in Sími. So it was the fast boats and the sponges, I understand.
The main source of income, say, it was the fishing sponges, you know.
So what you're saying is the Simeots got their freedom to manage their own island by just giving them some sponges and the fast boats?
Yes, but they had a free, duty-free harbor. And imagine Greeks owning the fastest sailing boats in Mediterranean and a safe harbor with no any control.
Yes.
That's how you explain those amazing houses. I mean, there are no fishermen building houses like these ones.
Money and providing a service that enabled others to attain wealth has long been a way for people to maintain their independence. It's not always military might that gives you freedom. Politics and commerce are powerful things.
So during the 18th and 19th century,
Yes.
I understand trade was a big thing with the Simeots. What did they trade? Because they had nothing to grow here.
They were trading everything. They were transporting goods of everybody else.
Right, so they were trading from different parts. Because they had the fast boats to travel around.
Fast boats and armed boats.
Armed boats as well.
Armed boats.
So how many ships, captains would they have had in those times?
4,000 or 5,000
Wow.
at least.
Wow.
The population at the time was about 25,000, around 10 times the amount here today. So to have 4,000 or 5,000 ships, the place would have been extremely wealthy. The neoclassical mansions, mostly built in the mid-19th century, are a testament to it. They're an example of the European influence that came here as a result of the island's far-reaching trade and prosperity, which in turn saw them absorb and then express inspirations from their travels. These broader cultural influences come in many forms, including the food that they now consider their own. You see, just like most Greek islands, they have a dish that they believe to be unique to them. You find this everywhere. An island with lots of goats will have a goat dish that's special to them. A place where a particular grain grows will use that for the basis of something that's eaten nowhere else. Here in Sími, they're known for their fried baby prawns, although the neighbouring island of Kalki also lays claim to it. I hate to break the news to both of you, but my Italian friend Maurice Tazzini has been serving me the same dish at his beautiful restaurant at Bondi Beach for decades. He claims it's Italian. There they call it gambaretti. However, the person I consider to be the judge on the matter is Kyriako, and he says it's a Simeot meal. I'm not about to argue with the guy that feeds me every day.
It's our last evening in Sími and we couldn't leave without having a local dish Τι θα φάμε το βράδυ?
Σημειακό γαριδάκι.
Little prawns from Σύμη. Okay, what have we got here?
Έχουμε το γαριδάκι αυτό καθαρισμένο.
Ναι.
Από κεφάλι, απ' όλα.
Okay.
Έτσι. Είναι διάστημο εδώ πέρα. Είναι...
So we've got some prawns that are peeled, and I can see some ouzo going in. But the Símiaki don't do it that. The Sími guys, go ahead. The Sími guys don't do it that way. He does it because sometimes the prawns can smell a bit. Now these prawns are little guys, right? You can start, Gidiako. These prawns are little guys. They've been peeled. They did look like this at one stage. And so what he does is he puts them in a strainer and throws them in some hot oil. Is that right?
Yeah.
How long, Gidiako?
Όλοι για μερικά δευτερόλεπτα.
Yeah, 10, 15 seconds, it's done. It's that quick, it's so easy. Ooh, yeah, that sounds good. Now, the Italian prawns that I've seen, the little guys, they actually don't peel them, you have them with the heads. In this case, they're a little bit bigger, so they cut the heads off and they actually peel them as well. Man, that looks awesome. And all they do is they take them out after 10 seconds, strain them, a bit of lemon, a bit of salt, that's it. How easy is that? So if you go into the markets, ask for the little prawns. And if you get the smallest prawns, then you don't have to worry about the heads, you don't have to worry about intestines, you don't have to worry about eggs, you just eat the whole lot. In this case, we've actually got the eggs inside there, which doesn't look too good when you're looking at the peeled prawn, but who cares? They taste absolutely awesome. Can you put some on a plate for me, please? Now, you don't eat them with the plate, do you? How does the Σύmiaki eat? What's it?
Θα σας δείξω αμέσως πώς το... Θα σας βάλω στο πιατάκι με λεμόνι.
Τι πες?
Θα σας βάλω στο πιατάκι εσάς για...
Ναι.
Με λίγο λεμονάκι.
Yeah.
Το βάζανε μέσα.
Δηλαδή, βάνεις λεμόνι.
Έτσι το δίνανε.
Έτσι.
Λίγο αλατάκι βάζανε.
Okay.
Βάζανε λίγο αλατάκι.
Well, if that's the way they used to do it, I don't do it like that. Now, I'm going to just pick it up with my hands here, mate.
Και περπατάγανε και στον δρόμο.
Let's try them out. Hang on, let's go. Oh, man.
Το όζο σας έρχεται λίγο στο τέλος.
Ωραίο,
Ναι.
Thank you, Kyriako. Thank you, Σύμη. Oh, let's get going.
Με χόρτα, κύριε Παναγιώτη.
Με χόρτα?
Αν με χόρτα και θα είναι μια χαρά.
Oh.
Είναι για να χορτάσουμε αυτά, δεν γίνεται. Είναι με ζέστη.
Oh. Είσαι με ζέστη, ναι.
Ναι, ναι.
There's no better way to finish my time on Sími than by eating something that's considered a local delicacy. One of the things that leaves the longest lasting and fondest memories of a place are the meals I enjoy while there. So from now on, whenever I eat a prawn or have some gambaretti at Morris's restaurant, I'll think of Sími. Heading south, our next destination was supposed to be Rhodes, but a small weather window allowed us to travel to the adjacent islands of Chalki and Alimιά. The latter of the two has to be my favourite uninhabited island on the planet. So naturally, it was the first stop. It's just a stone's throw from both Rhodes and Chalki, so I'm surprised more people don't come across here. I'm sure if you were inquisitive enough, you'd be able to find a day boat, water taxi, or even a fisherman willing to bring you over. It's certainly worth the effort. The beautiful water and quaint church create a stunning setting. There are even the ruins of a fort beckoning to be explored.
There's only one thing better than an uninhabited island, and that's an uninhabited island that's been inhabited at some stage. And Alιμιά, 4 miles west of Rhodes, is just that. Behind me is a classic example. This is one of 5 carved into rock dockyards from Hellenistic time. And there's so much more here. We're going to go and check it out.
Today, the peaceful bay is a contrast to the turmoil of what occurred here during World War II. This was actually a German submarine base, and the story of what happened here I'll tell you a little later. Prior to the war, there was a long history of the island being inhabited. In actual fact, in antiquity, there was a significant settlement on it. People remained here until the 1960s, but now it's a ghost town. All that remains are the crumbling ruins. While there's plenty to look at, there's one building in particular that I want to show you. A former tavern across from the church of Ayos Yorgos.
Main Street, hey? This appears to be Main Street, heading to the village. In front of me I can see the church and a few houses that go halfway up to the mountain. It's all dilapidated. People are long gone.
The island was abandoned for the same reasons you find elsewhere in Greece. While it might have been a pretty spot, life here was hard. There was a lack of work, many of the buildings were in disrepair, and the lure of the bigger, more populous islands nearby drew people away. Maybe also there were too many bad memories from the wartime, and the people just wanted a fresh start.
To the rear of the church is this little courtyard which faces a tavern. Let's go and have a look. When you first walk into the former tavern, you're graced with these absolutely magnificent murals. Up here you can see a German U-boat, a submarine. Over here is a light cruiser. And a bit further over you can see an E-boat, a torpedo boat. It's obvious that these German soldiers had very little to do while they were waiting to refuel ships. And there was one really good artist that painted these murals. And I'm told there are more murals further over in the military installation. Pretty good.
You'd think with all the research and reading I do, I would get the facts right. But occasionally, amidst all the excitement of being somewhere new and telling a story, a few things get twisted about. So when I said there were German boats painted by a German soldier, I meant to say it was an Italian soldier who painted Italian vessels. You can hopefully forgive my confusion because the Germans did occupy the island and the rest of the Dodecanese from 1943. But earlier in the war, it was the Italians that were here. What made this such an attractive place for a military establishment was its proximity to other key ports, but mainly the safe, deep water harbour. The ancient name of the island, Alimιά, from which its current designation is derived, actually means with good harbours. So it's long been known for its ideal conditions for maritime operations. The Italians recognised this and built quite a substantial base here. Along the shorefront, they constructed some minor buildings. However, further up the hill, in a safer position, away from the water's edge, there's a cluster of what would have been stores, accommodation and office space. Imagine the stories these walls could tell. There's actually one building in particular that gives you an understanding of what went on here in a very visual manner.
I'm told this is the one.
Finding it is all part of the fun of a stroll around the island.
Walking into this building that has 4 or 5 rooms with murals right through, you notice an immediate difference to the taverna, which was painted. Here they're all done in crayon, some in colour and some in black and white. But the other obvious difference is they're probably less public and they're orientated more to memories of home in black and white, of scenes of Bavaria. And in this case, there's a mermaid hugging a soldier. And the inscription above is a World War II German song, and it reminds me that these guys must have been thinking about their sweethearts, absence of any females on the island.
Standing here, looking at the walls, you're not simply gazing at a collection of pictures, you're reading a story, a very powerful one. This to me is the untold tale of many a soldier throughout history. They're sent to faraway places, thousands of kilometres from home and their loved ones. You can see it now, a young German private sitting alone and feeling homesick, looking out a window and wondering why he's here. This is a snapshot in time that we're privileged to be able to see. If you do find your way to Alιμιά, make sure you have a look, and I only ask that you leave it as you found it, so future generations can maybe learn the sombre lessons that these images impart.
It's here in this central part of this military installation where you can see the beauty and ugliness of war. Behind me, you can still see the camouflage of this administrative building. But in April 1944, 7 Allied commandos attacked the base. It failed, they were captured. They were then sent to Thessaloniki where they were executed. The locals confessed to assisting the Allies. They were then deported. Very few people remained here after World War II. In the 60s, Alimιά was abandoned. You know, these look like bullet holes. It obviously was strafed by an Allied aircraft, and you sometimes think when you see this that we're lucky to be living in the time and world that we're living in now.
Throughout the centuries, Alimιά has been abandoned several times. But as I walk through the streets, amongst the ruins, looking out towards the pristine beaches, I get the sense that maybe someday this beautiful village will again be settled. It's this dream, the history and beauty of the place, that makes it my favourite uninhabited island. Who knows? Hopefully within my lifetime, it could become my favourite populated one. For me, as a construction engineer and amateur historian, Alimιά holds a greater significance than you'd probably expect. The reason being, across this tiny landmass, there's evidence of civilization spanning several eras. There's the 4th century foundations of the 14th century castle ruins. Then you have the Italian base, built in the early 1940s, that sits within a 19th century town. There's a timeline of architecture that spans Greece's history, from antiquity to today.
Now, in our quest to bring you everything in Greece in our Greek Odyssey, we have to climb this mountain to see the ruins at the top. Now, it's the highest mountain on the island, and I don't think this peak has ever been named. It's hard work, but I love it. So I'm going to name it Mount Helen.
The rocky terrain was loose and unforgiving. The steep slope was challenging enough, let alone the slippery gravel. Every few steps I would slide back half a pace, and I had to pick my way through the stones, zigzagging up the hill. What should have been a 30-minute hike took twice the time. But the reward is well worth the effort. The views behind are stunning, and having the ruins looming overhead keeps you motivated to toil away.
Now, this is not the highest mountain we've scaled, but it's probably one of the most difficult because there's no trail. We're only following sheep and goat paths. I can tell you, it's not easy, but we're close. Oh, here we go. There's pottery shards all the way up the mountain. And you don't have to be a historian to work out that these are from antiquity, Hellenistic time. And the best evidence is right up there. When you look at the walls of that fortress, that castle, you can see the lower walls, those lower 2 lines. They're big blocks of stone. They're from the ancient castle, which is sort of 400 BC. And the blocks above it are from the medieval castle, from the Knights of St. John, from sort of the 14th century. I love this stuff. Better leave them there for somebody else, eh?
The fort is tiny, about 80 square metres. It provided a lookout for surveying the surrounding waters. It's one of the numerous similar forts or towers built by the Knights of St. John throughout the Mediterranean during the Middle Ages. These are the places from which they could monitor the movements of merchants and Ottoman ships and keep a watchful eye open for pirates.
As you come around this massive monolith plinth that's been etched out of this peak, you start to see the gate, which is just up there. And it's the only entrance to this castle on the east side. Don't bother going anywhere else, you'll be wasting your time. But I'm going to check out the back side of this castle because apparently there's some awesome blocks to look at. Blocks, yeah. I love blocks. I'm a builder. You get to the top and there's some relief for the quads that are feeling like jelly at the moment. Anyway, let's have a look around here. Wow. Check it out. That's it, enough climbing for me. Now that's amazing. It's amazing how the littlest telltale can tell a massive story. You see those two lintels up there that are straddling the rock. They seem, from a quick estimate, to be about 3 or 4 tonne. Now this isn't the pyramids in Egypt next to the Nile River with free-flowing water and a level land for thousands of people to build it. We're on top of a mountain. There is no water here. It's bloody hot. And it would have been a very difficult process with few men to build this, not only in the 4th century BC, but also again in the 14th century AD as a medieval castle. This is the sign of real human endeavour. It's pretty impressive. Anyway, better go into the entrance. I'm not going around there, that's enough. Ugh. Quads.
Only the fit and able-bodied are going to make it to this point. And the final approach to get into the doorway is the most dangerous part of all. By no means am I suggesting people do this without adequate experience or conditioning, or good insurance for that matter.
Now, it's not easy to get up here, but it's well worth it. Wow. So this is the medieval section of the castle, and you can see these clay shards. They're actually pottery from the 4th century, and the knights used them as packers to level out the blocks. Their resourcefulness, awesome. But this is absolutely magnificent. I mean, it must get the Guinness Book of Records for the smallest fort on Earth. Just 2 rooms. Look at it. It's like a little gem on top of Mount Helen. Wow, it's awesome.
Grand palaces and ancient auditoriums sure are impressive, but to me, these relatively modest finds are just as remarkable. Their simplicity hides the impressive feats of engineering and human enterprise it took to create them. Plus, there's nothing more rewarding than doing your own research to learn about the history and stories that the crumbling walls have to tell. The next episode sees me travelling 15 minutes west to Halki. It's the smallest inhabited island of the Dodecanese and just 6 kilometres from Rhodes. With only 500 or so people living there, it's a peaceful setting with a spectacular port that's like a miniature version of Símí. Despite it being only 28 square kilometres in size, Halki has plenty to keep you entertained, and I'm going to do my best to show you as much of it as possible. To see more of My Greek Odyssey, head to our website at mygreekodyssey.com. There you'll find plenty to keep you entertained, including Kyriakos' awesome recipes.